You are listening to Talking Star Wars. Hello, Star Wars fans.
I'm Alex,
And I'm Connor.
and today we are going to talk about Star Wars.
As we normally do, and we normally don't have a lot of opportunities to react to new Star Wars. I think we did a Tales of the Empire episode.
A few months ago.
Yeah, now we're talking about Acolyte, which is a brand new divisive program amongst the fans, but what isn't divisive amongst Star Wars fans?
Well, as Connor and I often say, there's no one who hates Star Wars as much as some Star Wars fans.
Mhm.
We are here to celebrate Star Wars, even if something is not particularly the cup of tea of many people. So, welcome to episode 73, our media survey about The Acolyte. So, Connor, what are your initial thoughts? This is an 8-episode series set during the latter days of the High Republic period, featuring the primary characters of Master Soul, Osha, her twin sister May, and the Stranger, a red lightsaber wielding potential Sith.
I think it was okay to pretty good. It started off okay, and then by the last three episodes, I was hooked. So for me, it was a little bit of a slow burn, but I don't think that there's a mentality that it either needs to be great or it's awful.
Yeah, I personally think I enjoyed Acolyte more than Connor did. I found several parts of it fresh from a Star Wars perspective. Much like Andor, the scale of the story was small and personal. We're not looking at the destruction of a galaxy, the conquest of a government, the blowing up of a planet, winning or losing a war. This is a very personal story, and it's told in the format of a mystery, where we do not know exactly what happened or what character knows what at which time, or who even the identity of these characters are.
Mhm.
So I found the mysterious element interesting because Star Wars has not done a lot of noirish mysteries. As you can see in our
Mhm.
episode about the genre intersection with noir, we explored all of the ways in which it had, and I think there is a great deal of fun mystery stories that Star Wars could tell.
Mhm.
And particularly the first 4 episodes are very much a mystery story. Who, why are these murders happening? Who is behind them? How do we find the culprit? What are the clues? Let's conduct a sting. Very noir.
And the thing that I find interesting is that we're taking this noir story, and it's allowing us to explore a part of the galaxy that we've seen from some corners. We've seen the idea of the fall of the Jedi. This feels like this is really the tipping point of when the Jedi start to become less stable. Uh, they're not the paragons of justice and peace. There's the beginning of some corruption here, long before the days of Anakin.
Even if not corruption, at least dogmatic inflexibility.
Mhm.
So before we get into some of the more themes, and we'll come back to those,
Mhm.
hopefully if you're listening to this, you've watched Acolyte.
Mhm.
But if you haven't, we're about to spoil the entire plot for you. But just so everyone, if you're listening to this in 3 years and don't quite remember the story of Acolyte, we start off by seeing May, the acolyte to what we learn is a Sith, murder a Jedi Master and has a list of 4 people she wants to kill,
Mhm.
as they were the ones who were involved in the murder of her family on their ancestral home of Brendok. Unknown to her, her twin sister survived and was raised as a Jedi Padawan before being kicked out of the Order. Given the fact that May is believed dead, her sister is initially blamed for her crime until they learn that it is in fact May who also survived.
Mhm.
The primary Jedi characters we have are Master Soul, who is on the list of Jedi who were present on Brendok.
And he was Osha's former master to her Padawan.
Correct, who still has a great emotional attachment to her. Come on, Soul. You're a Jedi Master, you should know better.
And that's the first thing to point out. Like we'll talk about it more later, but just that attachment is one of these
Themes,
Mhm.
yeah.
One of the downfalls of the Jedi.
Yeah, so it goes through the story. We learn that May is in fact the acolyte of a Sith who was probably trying to overthrow his own master. A bunch of Jedi are murdered by the Stranger, is the only name we have for him. That we have a fake name, but the Stranger then decides he wants Osha, Morris's apprentice, and Osha, finding out that Soul lied about how he accidentally killed all of her family, then turns on and kills her master. And then it turns out the Stranger is another Jedi Master's apprentice, the other potentially corrupt member of the Jedi Council, Vernestra Rowe, and highlighting, to Connor's point, the ongoing potential corruption or narrowing of the view of the Jedi.
Mm-hmm. So yeah, we get this. It's strange to say that we have a story from the point of view of the Jedi. I would argue that in the Clone Wars, the closest thing that we would have to a show led by Jedi, it's more so a show about the clones and Ahsoka Tano. If we had to pick a primary protagonist, yes, we have, episodes focused on Maul, episodes focused on Anakin, but if we have a through line of who starts the series off and who concludes it, this is a show about someone who does not grow up to be a Jedi, and the clones that she fights alongside. So I would say that Acolyte is the first time that we have Jedi as primary antagonists. Other than every other Star Wars movie with Luke Skywalker and Anakin, but this takes it from a very different point of view that's so far removed from the Skywalker saga that it's refreshing.
Yeah, so let's talk about the Jedi Order. So this is
Yeah.
one of the primary, I think, and most compelling parts of the Acolyte, is we see the Jedi Order at the zenith of its strength.
Mhm.
This is after they've won the conflict with the Nihil, but have retained their independence from the Senate. By the time the Clone Wars happen and the Phantom Menace rolls around, the Republic is firmly under the control of the Senate. They are, well, at this point in the story, are not yet entirely beholden to the Senate. That comes later. They become a tool and an arm of the Republic as part of their, I think, long-term downfall that allows Sidious to push them over the edge.
Mhm.
But we see them, they have temples spread throughout the galaxy. By the time we see them in the Phantom Menace, there's Coruscant and a few outposts and not much else. Power has been centralized significantly by the time of the Phantom Menace. That process is ongoing. So we even have temples with different traditions. They don't really appreciate the highfalutin Coruscant Jedi coming in and telling them what to do, which is a theme that continues from the other parts of the High Republic and has only continued in this later part of the High Republic. And I would say the Acolyte, while acknowledging that Jedi are heroic and powerful and are usually trying to do the right thing, also shows that concentrating that much power in people's hands can corrupt them. And it relies on a institution that is introspective and flexible to handle individuals with such power being given such responsibility, and how the increasingly inflexible Jedi Order produced by the war against the Nihil and the demands of the Republic have produced an order that is increasingly unable to answer the needs of the Jedi under its command. Sol and Master Indara did not feel comfortable telling the Jedi Council that something bad had happened. Compare this to Jedi Master Elzar Mann in Phase 1 of the High Republic, who straight up murders an innocent person in the heat of the moment, or calls on the dark side and throws a mountain at a ship, and confesses that to his best friend, one of the Masters of the Jedi Order, who is like, "We're going to get you help." Instead, Sol and Indara hide this for years. They do not feel that the current Jedi Council would allow them. The guilt drives one of them to take the Barash vow, which, as we've seen from other media, it means they withdraw entirely from Jedi politics and galactic society.
And I wanted to point out, we see Jedi Master Torben take this Barash vow in the Acolyte, and I think seeing it, his portrayal of a young Jedi Padawan being this almost seeking adventure, seeking a higher path than just taking soil samples on this planet. He wants something that's out of his reach. At present time, we have Jedi Knight Yord, who has a bit of an ego. He has a bit of, just a sense of his own abilities that isn't quite befitting of a Jedi. So I think it's interesting in seeing not just the older generations of Jedi who are, slightly souring, but even their Padawans growing up to be a little less than savory standard Jedi.
I appreciated the depiction of Jedi as people, in that I think we see in the original trilogy Jedi are kind of lionized, in that they're all dead. So no one is really there to gainsay Luke thinking that they were the best thing in the galaxy. But in the Clone Wars, we then see Jedi fall, we have Pom Krell, we have Ki-Adi-Mundi being inflexible, we have all of the depiction in the prequel trilogy leavens that bread. But I think The Acolyte specifically wants to shine a light on the structural problems. It's not just Anakin Skywalker did not fall entirely because of his own decisions. He ultimately bears the blame for the decisions that he made, but he was also failed by a system.
Mhm.
He was failed by a group. He was failed by his order, whether you want to call it a cult or a monastic order or a fellowship of warriors. I think the Jedi Order is all of these things in some ways. But he did not. He even reached out for help in the only way he knew how, and the Order was not flexible in the way that it could save Anakin Skywalker from himself. Nor was Obi-Wan empowered to do what they were all trapped by the expectations of their roles.
I guess if we talk about this idea of systems failing, systems falling, taking a look at why Sol and Andara decide to cause the tragedy that they cause, uh, it's in conflict with this other group of Force users, who, possibly rightly so, have reason to distrust the Jedi, to be separate from the Jedi, just because they're seeking the ability to practice the Force in their own way and not have it be dictated by a more patriarchal society.
If you have not watched The Acolyte, there are 2 episodes that Rashomon-style show the same event on the history of Brendok from 2 perspectives. One is how Osha remembers the night, including the incorrect information that Sol has imprinted in her mind over time.
Mm-hmm.
And then we see the full series of events from Sol's perspective, which is the truth.
Mm-hmm.
So, unlike Rashomon, we do get to the objective truth eventually, and instead it's the juxtaposition of how Osha saw the night versus how it actually happened.
Mm-hmm.
And we see that Sol had lied to his Padawan for years and utterly failed her. Allowed her sister to fall to what he thought was her death, caused the conflict, but at the same time, we never have any steeringly evil, manipulative people. Maybe the Stranger, probably. He's a Sith.
Yeah.
But the witches on Brendok are just trying to make their way. Are they doing the right thing? Are they potentially going to sacrifice their children? We're not sure. But their mother wants to let one of the children go to explore being a Jedi and goes against the Coven. But then her paramour, second in command, both, picks a fight with the Jedi. Master Andara absolutely forbids any conflict, but Sol, thinking that he is going to save some children's lives, intervenes and causes unnecessary deaths.
Mm-hmm.
Master or Mistress Amamaya, not sure if I'm pronouncing her name right, the May and Osha's mother, the mother as they call her, uses her dark powers to possess the mind of Torben, which in short term protects her family, the long term causes Torben to fixate and cause the deaths of her entire coven.
I enjoy when the remainder of the witches need to possess Master Kalnaka because he is a Wookiee. He has a higher fortitude than a Jedi Padawan. Almost villainously when Master Andara steps in. Either she did something intentionally or just her severing that link between the sisters and Kalnaka caused their demise.
So I think this can pivot us to the next subject, is just the depiction of how powerful the Force Jedi are, and the depiction of the Force in general. In that we have like a Jedi Padawan like Jeki, who is very skilled, and we have Osha and May, who are powerful natively in the Force and exploring that. But we have on screen 3 Jedi Masters depicted in a serious way, all of which are incredibly frighteningly powerful, whether that's Indara, Sol, or Vernestra. So, I mean, the Stranger cuts through 7, 8 Jedi Knights, hardly breaking a sweat. They are perhaps not prepared for combat. This is the High Republic. There's been no serious enemies other than the Nihil against the Jedi for now a century.
But then again, we have some Jedi like Sol who are proficient in a martial arts kind of way.
Well, and I think this just shows they're Jedi Masters. They are in depth, and not as we see in the expanded universe. Not every Jedi Knight ever attains the rank of Master. Some people just stay at the rank of Jedi Knight for their entire tenure with the Order. They retire eventually, but they are never granted the rank of Master. That is not a shame for them. It just means that they have not reached that, level of proficiency and trust within the Order. So to be a Jedi Master, it is driven home as a rare thing. It is a powerful thing.
Just don't tell Anakin that.
Well, again, calcification of the Order.
Mhm.
Battlefield promotions gave him an outmoded expectation of his own abilities.
Mhm.
Sidious manipulating him. Take your pick for the many toxic things that were working on Anakin in that moment. But for Soul, Yord is a Jedi Knight, capable, strong, dogmatic somewhat, but he is still willing to sacrifice. He would sacrifice his life to arrest Osha, and he would sacrifice his life to save her if she is under his care.
As the Jedi would.
Yeah, he's very Stannis in that regard. But then we have Soul, who, the stranger cuts through all of these other Jedi Knights and reaches the Jedi Master and is outmatched. So May, who is able to, evade other Jedi and took Endara by surprise and killed her that way by threatening a civilian, tries to fight Soul with all of her strength and has no chance whatsoever. He doesn't even draw his lightsaber. He defeats her barehanded with not even any concern for his own safety.
Yeah, going back to the witches for a moment and this concept of power. So, always enjoy talking about and delving into new ways of demonstrating Force abilities. We'll talk about the Force Virgins in a bit, but I wanted to point at what was happening right before Soul killed Osha's mother. It seemed like she was trying to make herself and her daughter go invisible, just because we have that moment of there's no one there, and then Soul has got his lightsaber in Osha and May's mother.
So I think this drives home the fact that if they were not Night Sisters, and they're not Dathomiri as far as we can tell, they are at least drawing from their traditions, because as we can see in Jedi Survivor and Fallen Order, Night Sisters did have the ability to become incorporeal and move rapidly through the Force. That is an ability that Cal Kestis eventually somewhat masters or utilizes with Marin's help as well. So it's like a variant of Force speed combined with some of the invisibility and movement that the Night Sisters managed. So it seemed to be in that vein where it was just. But the show does not stop and explain. Oh, this is not an anime. She's using a mysterious technique, a Force shadow. We must stop her. It's like, no, it just shows what's happening and the characters react to it, which is, of course, as you know, my preferred storytelling method. But yes, so I think, what do we want to call it? Force incorporeality?
Yeah, Force shifting, phasing.
Force. We can't call it Force Ghost because
go to episode, etc. on Force Ghosts, but they have that ability. They have the ability to possess Jedi, which Jedi being so clever and for just having the fortitude of mind for them to be possessed shows how powerful these witches are.
The power of many, as is another theme that we talk about.
And through the power of two, we have a Virgins of the Force. We have twins who aren't really twins, born of the living Force.
Yeah, so we learned that a Virgins in the Force, which is name dropped in the prequels, but we get it more defined here. We learned that the planet of Brendok was a victim of the Great Hyperspace Disaster at the beginning of the High Republic series, where all life on the planet was wiped out by a piece of the ship that was caused of the Great Hyperspace Disaster. But a century later, it's flush with life as if it has been evolved there for tens of thousands of years. So a Virgins in the Force is then defined as a wellspring of life, from which life can spring almost immaculately. And so this explains why the Jedi are so shocked that Anakin Skywalker is potentially a Virgin in the Force, in that would mean that he is a wellspring of life, or at least was born from one. Because we do know that he did not have a father. He was fathered by the Force itself. And Osha and May, our two of our main characters, while the genetic child of their mother, were the same soul split into two bodies to increase their power.
And this is, if we're to begin nitpicking the show, that would be my one area of pick to nit. I can see Osha as a character. I understand that she is, former Jedi Padawan trying to make it on her own in the galaxy. I can understand May at the beginning, someone who, has been ostensibly raised by a dark side user. We don't know how long she was on her own on Brendok 4 before being found. Um, but we have this idea of that she is an assassin, that she's going through these trials. I can understand why Osha would go from her current status, learning more about her past, and then flipping so that she becomes more antagonistic. I don't understand in the writing what happened because, as far as I saw, May saw, oh, my sister's Jedi scum, to immediately saying, I'm going to give myself up to the Jedi. I don't understand the motivation there. I don't understand what caused her to lose her more dogmatic, I am a blade of the dark side. Um, and then how the show kind of dealt with her from there. It's it's not clear why she's going to be important, if she will be.
So I see May as a victim throughout the entire story. This does not excuse the murders that she committed, because she did commit murders at the behest of her master. She did murder Master Andara. She facilitated Torben's suicide, and she killed other people. Whether Andara deserved death for her role in the deaths of all of May's family is moot. May straight up did murder a Jedi Master. But May was manipulated into that by the stranger. And she even straight out tells, when she thinks of him as Khmer, Osha being alive changes everything. Before, she was devoting herself to the dark side because she thought her sister was dead. And while she does not immediately tell, what she thinks is the other servant of her master turns out to be her master himself. That, oh, my sister being alive means that I no longer want to be a Sith apprentice or acolyte. That's what she's feeling. So she's like, I must go back with Osha. I'll give myself up. I don't want there to be any more conflict. But then it turns out her master's there, murders Kalnaka, and then the Jedi attempt to kill her. So then May is trying to survive, and then she just wants to go off with her sister. She's like, I didn't know you were alive. You're alive now. We can now be a team. When her sister then rejects her, she is then left with nothing. She has turned on her Sith master. Her sister does not want her. And so then her only thought is escape and survival, which is why she impersonates, and I think still then back on her revenge track, not for her master, but for herself. So she intends to then kill Sol, because she straight up saw Sol kill her mother in front of her.
Yeah, there's a little bit more of a personal vendetta there.
So May goes from member of a cult, not the Jedi Order, the Stranger's cult, to having these jobs, being manipulated in that way, to breaking free of that when her sister's alive, and seeking in that connection, to having that connection rejected, to then reverting back into, well, then I guess revenge is the only thing I have left. And then when Osha accepts her back, then that is her primary focus until her mind is wiped at the end. And then we don't know how May is going to act. My theory is that May will regain her memories because she and Osha, being two viewpoints of the same person, contain the memories of each other in some deep dyad-like level.
And that's what I'm curious about, too, because where we're left at the end of the story is that Osha is now, acolyte to her master, and the stranger is tantalized by Osha, sees more potential in her than he once did in May. I don't know, just as far as why I say this is an okay show, overall, is that I enjoy many aspects of it. I enjoy the themes of it. I think in its narrative structure, there are ways that we could better telegraph a mystery. Where I had an inkling that May and Osha, that there were twins at the start of the story. I had an inkling that, I was hoping that Khmer wasn't the stranger because they were laying it on so thick that he was the stranger. There are ways to have the plot and the character motivations be tied a little bit more covertly, a little bit more subtly into the plot than have long passages of dialogue where things are explained and hinted at, and I'm fine with the stranger being Khmer, but I think it could have been interesting if it was actually Indara, or if it was actually X, Y, or Z. Just another character that wasn't telegraphed as being that character from Inception.
So I might have just been damaged by Game of Thrones season 7 and 8, but I am fine if, oh, you hinted it was this character, and it turns out it's this character, because that's what the narrative was building towards.
Sure.
So there was actual clues leading up to indicating that Khmer was the stranger, and it turned out Khmer was the stranger. So that was satisfying to me. I did not need to be surprised to find it narratively satisfying, and I'm currently in a mood of prizing narrative satisfaction over abject surprise.
Sure.
And not all of us need to be Shyamalan writing The Sixth Sense. In fact, Shyamalan hasn't even been able to be Shyamalan writing The Sixth Sense since he wrote it. So,
I would, if with a show that posits itself as being such a mystery, throw me a red herring. Throw me because even Vernestra Rose seemed like, we know that she's off. We know that she is damaged in some way because she's a flawed Jedi. I thought, oh, geez, is she flawed enough to be, at the heart of this mystery as the dark side master? But she's tied in some way. Her and her lightsaber whip
definitely caused that scar on the stranger's back. Just a,
that I enjoy. I enjoy very much that we have. Oh no, my apprentice, who I thought I took care of, is now the cause of all of this madness. Time to cover it up. That was a very deft way to allow this show not to damage continuity in any way, and help motivate the decisions of the Jedi moving forward and how they treat the dark side.
Yeah. So now we sort of talked about Acolyte holistically, the story structure as a mystery, the depiction of the Jedi and the Force. Let's talk about those individual aspects that we really liked about it, because there is a lot to like here, and I think Connor and I would both agree, whatever the execution of it, this was different. This was new. This was not retreading old territory. This was not another thing about the Skywalker saga. This was not set in the same time period. This took place before The Phantom Menace, and this was the first work set before The Phantom Menace since The Phantom Menace came out in visual media, other than maybe some episodes of Visions and the flashbacks about Qui-Gon Jinn from Tales of the Jedi.
And now the prequels have prequels.
Yeah, so this was in a new time period, building off of a big media event in the High Republic. So the one thing that comes to mind is the oh shit element of a Jedi Master showing up. The witches are terrified. The stranger was not able to best soul and had to manipulate his new apprentice to do it. When Master Vernestra, who is a Jedi Master even a degree above soul, she leads a subset of the Jedi Council. When she shows up, Khmer does not go and confront his old master. The stranger runs the hell away. He does not want to confront her, and he leaves as soon as is feasible. So I appreciated that, in that he's like, I barely defeated Soul, and Soul was a quarter of the Jedi of Vernestra, whatever their moral failings of each of them. She is over 100 years old, and one of the most dangerous people in existence.
Banking off of that, so I think how I would define this is a show about Jedi. Jedi are a part of the universe in other pieces of Star Wars media, even when they are the focus, but this is a show about Jedi. This is a show about their relationships. I've already talked about the fact that we see a Jedi who's too attached, a Jedi who is so enamored with the status quo that they are deceptive, Padawan who is not following the path of the Force in a responsible way. So there's so many different ways that we see that, like you said, the Jedi are human and they're fallible. I enjoy that. I enjoy, off of that, the choreography and combat, because if we look at Ahsoka, Baylan Skoll, Ray Stevenson, that is an actor who can, I believe, swing a broadsword around and make it believable. It looks like Rosario Dawson is struggling with two lightsabers, and it's because they're using actual practical saber blades now that glow, and they are heavy. If you look at even the difference between Season 2 of The Mandalorian and Ahsoka, Ahsoka's combat becomes a little bit more natural and fluid, but you can still tell it's kind of weighted. That didn't feel to be the case here.
The combat felt visceral. So in the fight choreography, it did not feel like this is a lightsaber fight. It
Mhm.
felt like this is a duel between characters, and they happen to be using lightsabers as some of their weapons.
Mhm.
So it's like sometimes they turn off their lightsaber and punch each other. We
Mhm.
have our main villain with a cortosis mask that can disable lightsabers,
Mhm.
and that adds an element. They destroy scenery around them. They use the Force as their ally. They're almost unlike doing with the wire fu crouching
Mhm.
tiger, hidden dragon jumps with the Force between buildings that they're crashing through. The fights also do not last a very long period of time
Mhm.
because this is not. We've gone a little bit beyond the Phantom Menace where we have this spectacle for 15 minutes, the
Mhm.
Duel of the Fates. I still love the Duel of the Fates, but it's a little heavily choreographed. This was every action that every person is taking is trying to disable or kill the
Mhm.
person that you are dueling. So that 90-second duel or 30-second duel is then it gets you emotionally engaged. You're like, is Soul going to manage to defeat the stranger? Oh my god, his cortosis mask disabled his lightsaber. Oh, but now Soul just punched him in the face. The
Mhm.
trees are falling everywhere. They've just burst through that wall. Oh, is Jackie going to survive? Jackie just got stabbed 3 times through the
Mhm.
chest after a 10-second flurry of blows. Oh, she's actually dead.
Yeah.
So there was actual real stakes here, in that real named characters died in almost every episode.
And as much as I love Kenobi, when you have Darth Vader and Kenobi getting into a lightsaber duel,
You know that neither is going to
yes,
die.
and it's also shot in a very cinema verite, shaky camera way, which is a little nauseating. This you can at least tell what's happening. Um,
Yeah, when you have Reva stab the Grand Inquisitor,
mhm.
you know the Grand Inquisitor is going to survive because he
Mhm.
dies at the hands of Kanan Jarrus 10 years
It's-
later. So it's like, oh well, obviously he's going to use the dark side of the Force to cling to life,
mhm.
as is an established power of dark side users. But this story doesn't acknowledge that the viewer is going to know that,
Revenge gives one an incredible will to survive. Yes.
which is very Grand Inquisitor of him,
Oh
but
yes.
still. Yeah, but yeah, there were stakes
Yeah.
to every fight here, and it's like the first scene of the show is May murdering Indara, and she actually dies and stays dead. She appears in flashbacks, but
Mhm.
yeah, Master Soul dies at the end.
Mhm.
Kamir, if he had been killed by Soul, it would have been believable, and the story could have continued in a different direction.
Mhm.
So the show is not afraid to kill off characters, and if in the second season May or Osha die or kill each other or both die, so the
Mhm.
fights and the duels didn't feel like a D&D battle. We're like, oh, now we need to roll initiative for combat. It felt
Mhm.
like more this was arising out of the legitimate interests and goals of all the characters involved, and just the natural like this can only be resolved via conflict.
Mhm. So well motivated action, well shot action, well staged and choreographed action. The overall staging, the overall look of the show is fairly strong. Uh,
Costuming was excellent, showing a
mhm.
different. It was consistent across the Jedi and other areas, while also evoking an earlier time.
Mhm. Very elegant, very regal compared to your more earthly Jedi garb. Um, and the inclusion of gloves when the Jedi go out into the field, such a cool visual, just a slight difference there.
Yeah,
Uh,
and I think this is showing that at this time the Jedi are growing out of. They were more pathfinders. They were
mhm.
explorers. They were helpers and problem solvers. So when they're going out into the field, they're not necessarily going to fight. They
Mhm.
are also not necessarily like wearing a uniform. This is just I mean, they were,
Mhm.
but it's more evoking a practical set. Whereas by the time of the prequel trilogy, there's this heavier element of asceticism
Mhm.
where we go in the simplest possible robes. We all dress the same.
It's frowned upon if they wear armor in
And,
war.
yeah, until the Clone Wars arrives, and
Mhm.
then you have the armor that comes back. You have only 2 colors of lightsabers allowed, unless you're Mace Windu.
Mhm.
Um, in that, we don't see any yellow or many purple lightsabers left. So there's this sense of the narrowing and more dogmatic and more ascetic set of the Jedi is approaching, but we're not yet there. And there's still these various traditions. We have a different uniform for going on a mission versus being at the temple.
Mhm.
Vernestra Rowe is seen in like 5 different costumes depending on who she's talking to. She wears a formal Jedi like dress robe
Mhm.
to talk to the senator versus her mission robe versus her casual in the temple robe.
Mhm. And that's definitely not from the fact that the actor is married to the showrunner by any chance and wants to have dress time. Yeah, but
Connor,
uh,
your cynicism is showing.
okay, reel it back in, reel it back in.
One other thing I want to talk about is just all the depiction of the Sith.
Mm-hmm.
In that this is the Sith that are not either super ancient or Palpatine and Vader.
Mm-hmm.
And, Palpatine is our primary Sith throughout all 9 of the original movies. He comes back as a clone. So Snoke, it turns out, was just a failed clone of Palpatine. This, we get a little bit of the Sith credo. Pieces lie, there is only passion.
Mm-hmm.
And we also see him, being him, he is, so cloaking his actions in sort of this veneer of freedom, he is a murderous monster.
Mm-hmm.
He refers to a child he just killed as it. And while he might make a point about why are you sending child soldiers into battle, Jedi Order, he's still the one who doesn't absolve you from having killed that child, Kamir.
Mm-hmm.
But all that said, he's not there sneering, trying to conquer the galaxy. He is living in a cave with his Cortosis mask. He is a different take on the Sith, where leaning more on the personal freedom, passion angle, whether that's straight up like sexual passion towards Osha, which is definitely implied,
Mm-hmm.
or anger that he fights with, this rage, less than the cold, calculating control that Palpatine shows.
He kind of serves as the other side of the coin to the Witches of Brendok, where they all want that personal freedom to practice the Force in the ways in which they want, but it just so happens the Sith are kind of overtly evil.
Yeah, murder is a sacrament of my religion does not make murder okay. But I found him compelling because his worldview seems internally consistent,
Mhm.
in line with what we've seen for the Sith before, and in direct opposition to the Jedi, who, while are better than him, are not without the flaws that he. And you can see that his viewpoint is probably a product of how he was treated by the Jedi.
And we get a decent idea that,
The Jedi almost always produce their own monsters.
right, well, of course. I was going to say, we get a pretty good idea that the culmination of this storyline is going to end in tragedy. Uh, because, we do see a Darth Plagueis, or what we can assume, I believe that the showrunner confirmed that Plagueis is hiding in the shadows. Lots of people hiding behind things in this show. We have this, we've got Soul hiding behind a tree.
That's how we know it's a noir story. You have
Yes.
people dramatically hiding behind things and overhearing key information.
And just peeking. But we know nothing about what Plagueis wants. There's no idea of what his motivations are, what his outlook on his apprentice taking on an acolyte. Nothing in regard to that.
Yeah.
But we do know, we don't have a Emperor Kamir in the, Star Wars saga. We have a Palpatine.
And we have a Palpatine who was the apprentice of a Darth Plagueis practicing the Rule of Two, who killed him. So, based on that, there's enough detail in the setting that we can guess what happened. Kamir is Pelagius's current apprentice. At some point, he either leaves, like Maul did, faking his own death, or is killed by his master, perhaps in a failed attempt to overthrow him. As we see, Sith always need to keep their own backup pseudo-apprentice in line, because if they do at some point see an opportunity to kill their master, they don't want to start from square one and finding an apprentice to do their dirty work. You got to have someone waiting.
Waiting in the wings.
Yeah, we see that with Asajj Ventress with Dooku. We see that with the Grand Inquisitor as Vader's backup if he didn't cut it. We even see in Legends Vader was keeping Starkiller as his own backup apprentice, as Acolyte. So yeah, the Sith even have a name for this, and it's sort of to skirt their own rule.
Yes.
And I mean, the Sith are kind of like the Pirates of the Caribbean here. It's like they're more like guidelines than actual rules.
It's like they are the baddies, so they get to bend and break the rules as they see fit.
Yeah, and seeing the creation of life in Osha and May using divergence and the Force, we know that Pelagius has an interest in prolonging his life via the Force, which goes in line with what we see Palpatine having killed him for in the best written scene in Revenge of the Sith, where In
all the prequels.
Yeah, where Palpatine tempts Anakin with a Sith parable at a Mon Calamari opera.
Mm-hmm.
And every part of that sentence sounds strange, and it is also true that that is still the best scene in the entire prequel trilogy.
Yeah, it's I mean, that is definitely going to be intriguing if they venture into more of that relationship moving forward. Because I have my qualms with the show. I have my qualms with some of the character motivations, but I think that where they are leaving us off is uh, good territory to explore further. Seeing Vernestra versus Khmer, seeing what Osha's role is going to be as a Sith acolyte, seeing whatever they decide to do with May. Uh, Having, who's going to voice Pelagius. I still don't know how to say his name.
I think Darth Pelagius.
Okay, I'll have to listen.
Darth Pelagius. Have to hear Palpatine say it.
Right.
Or did Palpatine deliberately mispronounce his master's name as a final? Haha.
Aha, you loser.
But yeah.
This is a culmination of what we've gotten so far from the High Republic expanded universe run, which is still yet to conclude. I'm going to guess that we're going to see Vernestra and Khmer have some bond, some introduction in their relationship, and possible the fallout to that in the books. But how does this show stand up as a sort of follow-up to what you've read so far?
Yeah. So as a whole, again, I would say that I enjoy that the Acolyte did something new. New era, new characters. We get only a couple of returning characters. Vernestra from the books. Yoda's still around, of course. Mm-hmm. We see a young Ki-Adi-Mundi. But other than that, everyone's new. Khmer is new. Osha's new. May is new. The Order is here. The Republic is here. But we don't have any other returning characters from other media. Mm-hmm. And I like that. It is new. It is. We still see anyone who should be around is. But we're not relying on the appearance of Han Solo's great-grandfather. Mm-hmm. Or seeing a teenage Palpatine to make this work.
Even though my hopes for Season 2 include a teenage Palpatine.
It's still 100 years before he's even going to be in it.
They could fudge numbers. They're always fudging numbers.
Well, I mean, definitely the Disney canon has been leaning more to Force users having extended lifespans compared to the average member of their species, particularly with Vernestra. Mm-hmm. Unless you're Obi-Wan and you live on a planet with two suns. Right. That apparently if you're super stressed all the time on a planet with two suns, it apparently overrides your Jedi longevity.
In the last 10 years of your life, it'll age you about 3 decades. One thing, this is maybe for off mic, but isn't Vernestra Rowe and Barriss Offee from the same species?
Yeah, I've heard what species they are.
But Barriss aged quite a bit in her final years.
She was also on the run, so I suppose.
Jedi on the run, they're not living in cushy, palatial estates. They're probably abusing death sticks to some degree. I wouldn't put it past Obi-Wan to have he has all those Brazilian beers in his hut. I wouldn't be surprised if he had death sticks as well.
We're going to let Obi-Wan have his own personal time when he's hiding out from the Empire. Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's and they were Myrilians.
Myrilians?
Myrilian.
Okay, so yeah, the Myrilian species, it's unclear if they are long-lasting, longevity like Vernestra, or more so the quick to age. But yeah, you put a Jedi on the run and put obstacles in front of them, and they're sure to spend life, especially if, let's say Barriss could have been practicing the ability of the Force life give, whatever Ben Solo does.
Force heal, yeah.
The Force healing, that certainly takes life force. So for a long-lasting being, maybe that's what she was up to.
And Vernestra has several unique Force talents. Mm-hmm. And it was a nice point of continuity. They mentioned that she portrays the illusion that she gets ill in hyperspace. Mm-hmm. That's directly from the novels, where she has uncontrollable Force visions while she travels in hyperspace, which is very uncomfortable for her, because literally her mind will travel to other places in the galaxy beyond her control, and it can sometimes be dangerous for her to do so, which is why she stays on Coruscant most of the time.
I'm so glad you told me that, and we had this conversation prior to me watching that, because I thought that, out of context, was just the strangest reoccurring joke. It's like, yeah, we get it. She gets, motion sick. It's like,
That was a callback to her appearance in the High Republic, and I'm
hmm
hoping that they then do that because if it's seeing like Vernestra might be a viewpoint character in the
hmm
second season, which then showing some of her Force visions would be a great way to introduce her backstory to her former
Oh,
apprentice
yes.
Kamir, or even have some more of these like oh she's hovering over her shoulder, you can sense her presence,
hmm
all the things like that. There's turn Vernestra had a Luke-like moment of doubt and thought her apprentice might fall to evil, but instead of Luke hesitating, she just straight up stabs him.
hmm
Um, Vernestra lived through the
Flashes.
war against the Nihil, so she is a much like other Jedi who survived the Clone Wars. She has been battle hardened, and I think sees herself as someone who's willing to do the dirty jobs for the Jedi Order, and in doing so is doing a disservice to both herself and the Order.
So yeah, I do hope that the show gets another season. Um, it will hinge on the quality of that season, whether this can kind of act in threes and give it, the fabled third arc to a story. But I believe in the environment, the uh, concept well enough to be interested in seeing what they do with these characters.
Yeah, I would like it to show more about potentially leading up to the fall of the Jedi Order. I would like to see what Vernestra talked to Yoda about, and I want to see more of the Sith lore. The Sith have been in hiding for a millennia. What
Mhm.
are they up to?
Yeah, what is the nature of the rule of two? What's that all about? What have they been up to?
Yeah, and does it just end in tragedy with Darth Pelagius butchering his apprentice and his apprentice's acolyte in
hmm
a failed attempt to seize that? And our last shot is of Pelagius approaching an ambitious young senator from
hmm
Naboo, having sensed his interest in the dark side.
hmm
If we set this in 30 years, I'm good with that too.
Yeah, that final coda. But we'll see. We'll see if the fans will allow it to happen, and if Disney will respond well.
Well, thank you for listening to our somewhat rambling but deep thoughts on the Acolyte. If you have your own thoughts, please feel free to share your thoughts on our subreddit, reddit.com/r/talking Star Wars, and join us next week to hear more about Star Wars.
Until then, we'll see you sometime soon in a galaxy right here.